Penn State's passing attack needs to do these two things if they want to avoid being the downfall of this season.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On to Penn State football, and as always, thank you so much for checking out another edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily source for all things Penn State sports. My name is Zach Seyko, and I am your host of the show, credentialed media member for Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. Well, if Penn State's passing attack, particularly the wide receivers, but the tight ends are included here, if they want to avoid being the Achilles heel for this Penn State team like they were a season ago and the year before that, they're going to have to avoid these two things. I'm going to explain what those are and just talk about the depth chart, players that are going to generate buzz, and which players you can expect to be the leading receivers on this team. But I want to start with the concerns that I have with the passing game still. And it's primarily these two things. One, first, because this is something that Penn State can control, in-game chemistry. The chemistry that Penn State needs to build with not one, not two, not three, but four new starting pass catchers. And you lose that focal point in Tyler Warren. That's a big deal. Penn State's losing Tyler Warren, superstar in the Heisman voting, but you can overcome that with what they have returning and what they added in the offseason. You now have Trevor Pena, Devontae Ross, Kyron Hudson, Luke Reynolds, a better version, right? Better version of Luke Reynolds, a better version of Khalil Dinkins, a better version of Andrew Rapplier. That's three tight ends. And so they didn't have that luxury a season ago. You had a true freshman in Luke Reynolds. Khalil Dinkins battled some bumps and bruises. Andrew Rapplier missed the entirety of last season. Nicholas Singleton will be a better pass catcher out of the backfield. You'll have Katron Allen. Do you get Quentin Martin and Corey Smith involved? So Penn State has over a half dozen options to get involved in the passing game. And it's that diversity that Penn State has, that quantity that they'll be able to succeed with. And that's going to carry over into my second point, which I'll get to in just a moment. But you have to build the in-game chemistry. Drew Allar is breaking in four new starting pass catchers. That takes time. That takes repetition. You were practicing. Drew Allar had 3 years to work with Tyler Warren to get into that, to get synchronized, to build that rapport. Also, the offense. You know, being in the offense and having that full. So it's nice that Devontae Ross and Kyron Hudson. So that's a little more particular to Trevor Pena since he joined after spring football. You need to air the football out in the first few weeks. And you can do that with little to no consequence. So if I'm Penn State, just throw it deep. I know that was a big joke a couple years back, but you might as well against the likes of Nevada, FIU, Villanova, FCS, Villanova. That's where you start to build that chemistry because you don't want to be doing that against Oregon. You don't want to be testing passing concepts against the Ducks, and you certainly don't want to be doing it against Ohio State or even a team like Iowa. Iowa is always going to have a top 10 like defense. Maybe I'll split hairs and say, okay, they're 14th or 13th. They might have a top 10 performance on that day because they're at Kinnick and that might be a night game. You get what I'm saying there. So if you're Penn State, you're Drew Allar, you got to build that rapport with Devontae Ross as soon as possible. Trevor Pena, Kyron Hudson. And then you still have Luke Reynolds and Khalil Dinkins and Andrew Rapplier, but it's mainly the three receivers since they are brand new to the program, since they're not completely acclimated with Andy Kotelnicki's playbook. Air it out, throw it a bunch, and then, sit on the football, run it where you can. I'm not saying just throw out the entire playbook, show everything to Oregon, show everything to Ohio State, put it all on footage. That's not what I'm advocating for. You can still run simple passing concepts to get the timing down, the trust, those kinds of things. Here's part two. The second part of this is injuries. And I know that's out of Penn State's control, but the wide receivers in particular, if they are ravaged with injuries again, could absolutely be the Achilles heel of this team. Because having Trevor Pena, Devontae Ross, and Kyron Hudson are great, much better than the core of wide receivers, because Penn State had all three of those wide receivers, I think, are better than Trey Wallace. They're either right there, step for step, in terms of what they can give in terms of production, or better. And then there was Amari Evans. So this group of three is much better than the group of two that Penn State had a season ago. And it's that addition of Trevor Pena that really pushes this group forward. But if they're not healthy, what do you have in Tyseer Denmark? I guess this is an adjacent point too, is that if this group needs to stay healthy, or you just need somebody else to step up, is that Tyseer Denmark? Is that Peter Gonzalez? Is that Koby Howard? Again, I don't want to get too much into that. We're going to talk about that in the upcoming segment. But just to tease it a little bit, what are you getting from those players down the depth chart? Because, if you lose Devontae Ross, there goes your speedster. There goes your deep threat. And Devontae Ross, from what reports have said from On3, is banged up. He's not going to be 100% to start the season. I know some people might know about that. I want to reiterate that. Devontae Ross is the first one to deal with some injuries here. He'll be fine. He'll be okay. He'll be good to go to start the season, but he's not a full go to start training camp. Is that a concern? Not necessarily, because he'll be ready to go week 1, week 2, right? But you're still going to miss time. You don't want him to miss. You don't want him to miss any time, whether that's in training camp or even a tangible football game against the likes of Nevada. So if you lose somebody like Trevor Pena for an extended period of time, because that's how Penn State had Tyler Warren. Penn State still had that trio in the backfield of Drew Allar, Katron Allen, and Nicholas Singleton, and a pretty good offensive line, an offensive line that is much better going into this season because of everything that they returned and then the depth that they added. But you can still run into the same issues if your wide receivers can't create separation. Ohio State brings the safeties down, stacks the box. Penn State becomes predictable. Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen aren't as effective because there's no respect for the wide receivers. But you don't have these issues if Hudson, Pena, and Ross are on the football field at the same time, because then you have to respect those wide receivers. So staying healthy, again, that's circumstantial. Injuries are going to happen. Injuries are a part of the game. But if you lose 2 of those 3 starters, you're right back in the same spot if you're Penn State, particularly early in the season, because I think this passing attack will struggle at times. It's not going to be perfect. But after the midway point, halfway through the season, this passing attack, as long as it stays intact, will be much better down the stretch of the season and should be peaking when it matters most, postseason football. Now let's talk about the depth chart, breakout players. Who's going to generate buzz for this group? That is all coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning for big purchases, Monarch Money puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And I think that's the best part, is being able to track your purchases. So Monarch Money allows you to see what you're spending on groceries or subscriptions, or if you like to order from Amazon a lot, you can balance all of that. And managing your money with a partner is smooth and easy. All of that information is shared where you can track all of those same things and make it seamless with somebody else. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for, get this, 50% off your first year. That's right, 50% off your first year over at monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Let's get into the overall look of the depth chart and then talk about those breakout players, what to expect, and when to expect them to break out. Right? I think that's important. It's not, okay, not only will they break out, but when will they break out? How about the depth chart? Okay, Kyron Hudson, transfer from USC, is going to be the X wide receiver. That's the number one, if you will. Now, I think the stats are going to reflect differently. So we're also going to make some subtle predictions here as far as who's going to be Drew Allar's favorite target, who could be the leading receiver, how many yards, how many catches will these players get altogether? Because this is going to be the strength in Penn State's passing attack lies in the fact that Drew Allar can go anywhere at any given time. If everybody's healthy, you can go to Kyron, you can go to Trevor Pena, you can go to Devontae Ross, Luke Reynolds. You get my point. Running backs too. Kyron Hudson's your X. Your Z wide receiver is Devontae Ross. Your slot wide receiver is Trevor Pena. I mean, Penn State picked up 3 starters out of the transfer portal. That is impressive. And the caliber of receivers that they picked up. Kyron Hudson, that's a crowded USC wide receiver room, but Hudson still made plays. He was still in that timeshare. It was just so diluted with talent. Devontae Ross, 1,000-yard receiver. I know a group of 5, Troy, I get it, but he was making some big plays against Iowa's defense. Could that be another situation where Devontae Ross has that kind of game against Iowa at Kinnick? He's done it before. Maybe he can do it again, right? With a better supporting cast. Trevor Pena. Trevor Pena was an all ACC wide receiver. Now, I want to refer back to what I said in the offseason about how Pena, yeah, he makes this group better, but don't necessarily view him as a superstar. He is another player that is going to help because, again, he can be a player that in isolation can win those one-on-one matchups. But is he a guy that takes over games? Could he have that 200-yard type of series, like a Jahan Dotson type of game? Probably not. Probably not in that situation, but he's still reliable, and he's going to be able to balance out what Penn State offers because of that supporting cast. You could argue that Pena is the best, most talented at this given time. Luke Reynolds might have a higher ceiling as a pass catcher at tight end, but I think at this given time, Trevor Pena might be the most talented overall. I really like Devontae Ross. I do. I think Devontae Ross, if he stays healthy, that he can be Penn State's leading wide receiver because of the big playability, speed. He was probably the MVP of spring football, if you will, because of the way he practiced, what he showed in the blue and white game. Best separation, the ability to be used in trick plays, jet sweeps. It's the way that you can get Ross the football, especially with Andy Kotelnicki's creativity. So that's what to expect there from that group. I think that Ross could be your leading wide receiver in terms of yardage. Receptions very well could be Trevor Pena. But the ball is going to be spread out. Luke Reynolds is going to be factored into this. Khalil Dinkins too. Andrew Rapplier, the running backs. Let's get into more of the depth chart. So behind Kyron Hudson is really a question mark because I don't know that there is a next true X wide receiver. Tyseer Denmark, consider him wide receiver 4 instead of the second X wide receiver, the second Z, the second slot. He can play anywhere. I think that's what Tyseer Denmark has going for him. But how soon can he break out? Because you need him to break out sooner rather than later. Denmark is that X factor that really can make this group a lot better than what it is. If Denmark doesn't have that surge, well, then this group's really going to have to rely on the 3 veterans. And that's okay if they can get the job done. So Denmark, I circle again. He generated buzz as a true freshman, which is great. But now it's year 2. You have to begin to put up or shut up kind of situation. And it's not to demean him or anything. I'm just saying that he has to be that kind of player that can be reliable. Because Kyron Hudson can't play 100% of snaps every day. Trevor Pena, Devontae Ross, forget about injuries for just a moment. You need somebody that can rotate in, and a defensive coordinator isn't going to go, oh, Penn State's running the football. That's the concern. So Denmark, I think overall, can be that guy, but it will take time. It's going to take time because he will need to see that action, that repetition going into that first part of the season before he truly breaks out. Again, after the midway point, Denmark stays healthy, can really be an asset in this passing attack. Liam Clifford's going to be the backup slot receiver behind Trevor Pena. Clifford could play a little X as well. I do think that Clifford is your immediate backup to Trevor Pena. Again, it depends what Denmark's going to do. Because I think Denmark is wide receiver 4. Kyron Hudson goes out, Denmark. Trevor Pena goes out, Denmark. Devontae Ross goes out, Denmark. So since he kind of floats wherever you need him to, in my mind, Liam Clifford might be that more immediate backup to a Trevor Pena. Caden Saunders would be the backup to the backup. He would be the third slot wide receiver. Peter Gonzalez, Koby Howard. Who are the players that are going to be this season's Tyseer Denmark? They generate buzz, and if the opportunity presents itself, they get into the ball game because it's that portion of the depth chart that can really put this group over the top. And I'm going to talk about them more in depth coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. The players that will generate buzz during training camp, and again, I'll include the tight ends here as well, but this is primarily focused on wide receiver because, like I said, that was the Achilles heel the past 2 seasons. Koby Howard is that player that will fit into, this is the true freshman that is generating buzz. What Tyseer Denmark did a season ago and throughout portions of the season too, Koby Howard will step into that role as, okay, can he be a contributor sooner rather than later? Like Koby Howard a lot. Is he a true freshman? Yes. Yes, he is. But his tenacity, physicality, ability to block, same thing with Tyseer Denmark. I was impressed when I saw, okay, Tyseer Denmark's a smaller, shifty wide receiver. He's not he's not somebody that's going to be able to push people around him. No. Don't get that misconception like I had. Tyseer Denmark can be a blocking wide receiver. Koby Howard, same way. I like that players that are in year 1 and year 2 are not afraid to be scrappy. And that's important when Penn State's still going to be primarily a run-first offense. You have Nicholas Singleton, you have Katron Allen. You don't fix something that isn't broken. You still need the passing game to be complementary. Koby Howard is that player that, because of his current ability, because of his work ethic and rolling early, Howard could be in the rotation sooner rather than later. Peter Gonzalez, I think, is a name to watch among the wide receivers as somebody that can generate buzz. He's been dealing with injuries back to his time in high school, time during early at Penn State. Peter Gonzalez is the player that can help solidify this depth chart since he's going into year 2. He understands the playbook. He understands the situation. And if he's healthy, I mean, this was a player with a ton of upside at the time, but the reason his ranking out of high school as a recruit, consensus 3-star, the reason for that was because he was missing time. He was injured. So the scouts, the recruiting coordinators could only go off of so much, but that's why he was a strong take for Penn State. And that second part of the depth chart, the second string of Peter Gonzalez, Tyseer Denmark, Liam Clifford, is not a bad rotation as backups. But again, if they're thrust into starting action against some of the best cornerbacks in the entire Big Ten, well, then that's where it gets dicey. And then that's where you can double one specific player. Okay, so it's a domino effect, if you will. Luke Reynolds is going to generate buzz himself just because I really do think he's in line too. He's not going to be Tyler Warren 2.0. Tyler Warren could do some very special things, but in terms of receiving ability, reliability, big play ability, Luke Reynolds is your guy that will only get better as the season progresses. No concerns there with his injury, or I guess I shouldn't say with his injury, but he did miss time in training camp. So there was certainly a precaution. Spring football, he missed time in spring football. There was certainly some precautions taken to make sure that he wasn't hurt going into fall season. Got confirmation that he's all good to go day one. There's no, and James Franklin didn't mention it at all leading up to it over the summer. So for anybody that said, hey, where's Luke Reynolds? He was missing spring football. No concerns there. And then you have Khalil Dinkins that has showed promise in the passing game. Andrew Rapplier should not be forgotten about. Hey, I will buy some stock in Joey Schlaffer, someone that is going into year 3. Is he going to be a focal point? Is he going to be a star? Not necessarily because of what you already have at tight end, but Penn State's 4 deep at tight end. You can bring Schlaffer in, and he's not going to be a liability. He can give you production in the blocking game and the passing game as that second tight end. And then you have Andrew Olish, 5-star tight end, waiting in the wings. A player that's only going to get better as time progresses. But if I had to highlight players that are going to continue to generate buzz, Luke Reynolds in his own right, because he's going to teeter on that, okay, is this a breakout player or is he going to progressively turn into a star? It's not necessarily about the surprise factor. It's about giving him credit where credit's due, that he's much better than anticipated. The guys that you will need to watch as those surprise players, those sleeper players, if you will, Peter Gonzalez, Koby Howard are the wide receivers that you need to watch out for. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Again, the passing game is better, but it could run into issues if you don't build that chemistry and if you deal with bumps and bruises. It's a fact of the matter. It's circumstantial, and it's part of the game of football. Thank you so much to each and every one of you for checking out this episode. Really appreciate the support on the show. Thank you to the everydayers. If you're not an everydayer, become one. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. We're going to have more previews, more analysis around what this Penn State football team brings to the table for this upcoming season. Talk about wrestling, basketball, recruiting. All of it is going to be right here coming up on Locked On Nittany Lions.